welcome to Animal Punditry, the podcast where we have a trough of takes for topics you might care about. It is January 21st. I'm Eric.
I'm James.
All right. So while last week had some kind of exciting, a little more funny news, this is a little bit more of a serious week, I suppose. In the longer term topics we will cover. And we've got a brand new segment coming at the end. And then, but first we're going to dive into the short term stuff. So domestic US politics, people are talking about the anniversary of Biden's inauguration. We're getting a lot of criticism. James, do you feel like this is warranted, dealt a bad hand? Has the Biden administration been handling things generally well, or they've been fumbling? Where are you feeling? What are you feeling?
First of all, Eric, we can always find the humor in these topics, so they're never that serious. And yeah, I've been kind of looking around. I think the coldest take right now that you could have is to give Biden an incomplete. I've been hearing that quite a bit, and as much as it's like an ice cold take, I think that's actually pretty fair. Presidents usually inherit a lot of their problems and issues. None of them, I think, Biden really started. So yeah, I mean, at the same time, actual administration and management of the withdrawal from Afghanistan could have gone better.
Could have gone better. Oh man,
could have gone better.
I almost forgot about that.
So yeah, what are your thoughts?
I'm lining up with you pretty well here. He was dealt a pretty bad hand to start off with. I mean, you have with rising prices. I mean, I think the easiest criticism and I think a little bit a nuanced criticism is inflation. And simply pointing to money supply is the only indicator of rising prices. Not a macroeconomist, but I mean, when the pandemic first started, gas prices oil futures were zero. I had a friend filling up for like 80 cents a gallon. Like these OPEC and private oil and energy companies lost so much money at the beginning of the pandemic that they're trying to recoup. And then I think there's a combination of trying to recoup losses. Demand is up with still wonky supply stuff. So I'm getting dangerously close into transitory inflation talk, which I don't blame Jerome for holding on to that narrative, because I largely agree. And still it's difficult because inflation's largely self-fulfilling prophecy kind of thing in some aspects. So it's him personally and him professionally may have been separated, but him professionally needed to take the transitory line. It may be true that we're in actual inflation, but who knows how bad it's going to be. It's one of those tricky things, but yeah,
it's that concept of, the self-fulfilling prophecy, right? Especially for inflation.
Exactly. And the other stuff, yeah, the thing that you pointed out already, the Afghanistan pullout was such a mess, and was destined to be a mess, but it could have certainly been executed a lot better. So to squarely put on their blame, and he wasn't exactly set up super well going into it, but I don't think they did themselves a lot of favors there. And yeah, it's just tough to do anything when you're president. I'm kind of in the camp that presidents can do a lot of things. Some things they really have no power over that people think they do, and it's easy to point the blame at them, even though they can't really do much about a lot of things. I mean, they can break things down easily, as we've learned, but in order to actually make real progress and move forward with an agenda, it's really, really tough to even get your own party behind it, let alone try to get it through both houses. So,
Well, I think especially when you're looking at foreign affairs, that it is much more of a top-heavy executive branch game, and he has a little bit of a challenge slash opportunity coming up right now with the Russian movement of troops to Ukraine as well. I think that if, depending on how he handles this situation, it will really set the tone for the rest of his foreign policy. And I think it'll overshadow the Afghanistan withdrawal, especially as he's, as he's going into his second year.
yeah, absolutely. And those opportunities are big. But one thing that I've noticed over Biden's tenure so far is that he still kind of wanted it both ways, in the sense that President Trump would give the rest of the world the outright finger. And Biden kind of wants to use and feel like he still needs to navigate foreign policy in a more nationalistic sense than Obama did, and still kind of look in the America-ish first kind of way, but also saying like, hey, world, we're back, but also kind of fuck you at the same time. I don't know if that's something that a conclusion that you've come to, but I've kind of seen that he's, yeah, trying to get it a little both ways.
What's making you say that?
So for listeners, this is kind of early in the morning, so we're morning edition animal punditry, but like with the AUKUS deal, there was the outrage in France, and so he was kind of like, well, all right, we got to think about us first, and then the handling of COVID is very much ensuring that everyone had access to a booster before really moving the needle, like really trying to move the needle on global vaccination, which is not easy. And I'll give him that getting like US-based pharmaceutical companies to sign deals to export vaccines to the rest of the world is not easy. And it's a lot easier to just like, okay, we're going to vaccinate all of our citizens. And it's more politically popular to just vaccinate all citizens. But in terms of actually addressing the pandemic itself, we need more global vaccinations. So there's been some moves that he is the president of the United States, and so he needs to pay attention here first. And so, and with sentiment, especially on conservative leaning parts of the country, there's been that more America first fervor and anti-internationalist, therefore anti-international sentiment. So I think Biden doesn't want to push them away too much. I can't think of more specific instances right now, but that's just something that I've found curious. Well, also when he goes to the G7, he's like, "We're back, baby," which, like, I think Macron had a quote where he was like, "Yeah, you're back, but I don't know." But then Merkel was obviously just overjoyed to be like, I can retire in peace."
Yeah, a lot of that just seems like it's foreign policies that have domestic factors in it instead of rather like an America first thing. I do think that there is a market departure in terms of trade policy when he starts talking about foreign policy for the middle class. He's is taking that into consideration. It's not just pure like comparative advantage between countries and trying to get like the best outcome.
Absolutely.
But in terms of America first, I just haven't really seen that yet. He's working with other countries, especially the G7, to set up to help cover the infrastructure gap in developing countries, which I think right now is estimated to be about $3 trillion or so. He's making sure, or he's worked into that it would be climate smart infrastructure and projects. So, you know, that kind of helping out the global commons there as well. So even just those few examples, And you brought up AUKUS with the submarines and stuff, but again, that's looking out for our allies. That wasn't just in the U.S. self-interest. Australia wanting to build up, longer lasting submarines and nuclear submarines to help counter, any Chinese influence in that arena. So I see what you're getting at there, and obviously, like, there's only been 1 year, but I think
Absolutely.
just it's naturally been very domestically focused. So that's why at times it can seem like, oh, he's just focused on pushing the U.S. forward, when actually it's just we're heavily influenced by domestic factors right now.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, we're very constrained in that sense, in terms of foreign policy, vis-a-vis foreign policy. You're a global policy master's graduate when you say vis-a-vis. I'm pretty sure I used it right. That's it on the talk about the Biden 1-year anniversary. And so before we get into our more long-term news, we want to bring in a new segment to the show. It's called This Week in History, and it should be fun. We hope to keep it up. Today is the anniversary of Vladimir Lenin's death. It is the 97th anniversary of his death. And so there are very interesting things that come out of him passing away in that context, because of course the burgeoning new country coming out of Tsardom was just a sweet little baby country. And so due to Lenin passing away, the power vacuum, basically Trotsky got exiled and Stalin took over, and the rest is history. And as we learned, neither of us knew that Lenin was that young when he passed away. And so he easily could have had
53.
53. So say he would have lived 20 more years. Say he would have, or 25 rather, going through World War II. Do you think he would have played World War II like Stalin did?
Oh, we're getting into the what ifs of foreign affairs 20 years after.
Oh yeah.
All right. Well, you're putting me in an impossible situation, so I'm just gonna say that I'll take the stance that individual leaders don't have a lot of influence overall when it comes to the world situation. Countries randomly bump into each other like billiards. So argue against that, Eric.
So I think that he would have taken a more constrained approach to World War II and needed a lot more, would have needed US and Britain to grovel more to get him to act. I guess it would have depended on if Hitler would have treated Lenin differently than he did Stalin, and how that attack on the Eastern Front would have gone. So, and I don't know, I doubt Hitler would have treated the Eastern Front any different than he did. And so Russia probably would have needed to put in as many troops at the time. And so maybe the biggest difference would have been domestically, or maybe it really wouldn't have been different at all. I don't know, but it feels like
maybe he wouldn't have signed the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact. Maybe he would have kept them completely out of the war.
Maybe things could have ended up very different in a bad way for Europe. Who knows? Because obviously Russia was.
We're an anti-Hitler podcast. That's why we took the stance that Germany's expansion would have been bad for Europe, just for our listeners.
Yes, exactly.
It was tough to convince Eric, but I got him over to the light side eventually. It's like, I'm only doing this podcast if we're an anti-Hitler podcast. And he was like, I think we should look at these issues objectively. And I was like, Eric, I'm telling you, man, this is an easy win.
This is a part. Can you please edit this out? This is what I was supposed to make it in. Okay,
yeah,
but anyway,
sure, no problem.
I'm keeping it in. So Lenin, pull ourselves back from the counterfactuals that don't really have any real value to a conversation. So obviously Lenin's one of those people, one of those history shaping people. And so he had 3 strokes, which is crazy that he survived as long as he did. And if you would like to learn more about Lenin, Revolutions podcast with Tim Duncan, highly recommend the Russian Revolution. And there's like so much to learn from a political economy sense, let alone just the sequence of events that happened. And that Rasputin was even more of a dirty perv than you already think that he was. So there's that to learn about as well.
Is Tim Duncan gonna like give us a shout out on Revolutions now since we gave him a shout out?
Tim Duncan, if you shout us out on Revolutions, that'd be amazing. No pressure. It's totally fine if you don't. And so that's this week in history. We look forward to diving into some more. And this one is a little bit off the cuff. And so, yeah, I hope you all enjoyed it. All right, I think that's about it for. We're gonna kind of use this next one in a segueing purely international, but Secretary Blinken is going to Ukraine and has met with Russia's foreign minister already, I believe, and he will be meeting with President Zelensky. And so with Secretary Blinken physically being 2 feet on the ground, probably dress shoes, not boots. Is this going to be reassuring to Europe and Ukraine, or succeed in deterring Russia, one a little more than the other? Do you have any thoughts on the what measures success in this visit?
I think that this actually kind of gives reassurances to both sides, both to our European allies and to Ukraine, as well as to Putin, actually. And the fact that Putin, I don't think that he was ever meaning to actually fully on invade Ukraine. I don't think that was his main objective. I think he really wanted to bring the US to the table to talk about NATO expansion, especially deploying missiles anywhere near Ukraine, or really along that like far eastern NATO front. Because you put missiles into Ukraine, you can reach Moscow in 5 to 7 minutes. And if you're looking at this from Putin's perspective, the encroachment's not coming from him, right? He's reacting to encroachment by the West, decades-long encroachment by the West, of NATO slowly creeping out, expanding, bringing more and more countries into its fold. There's not really a clear like dividing line. If you look at the borders of, okay, it's from like back in the day, it's like, all right, it's from like Germany over, right? There's not really that anymore. It's very much more of a crooked line. And so I think Putin really just wanted to negotiate, but at the same time, it goes back to that legitimacy thing we talked about last week. And I think he's fully prepared to go into Ukraine, but I don't think that's his actual objective. I know some people think that, Russia, is having a tough time domestically. Putin's going to act out in a foreign affairs issue, just like he did with Crimea. But I think, if you put yourself in his shoes, that's still, if you go into a war, that costs money and that costs lives and that costs a lot of political clout. Maybe I should have put lives first, but so we got to get out of this mindset, and I don't think Secretary Blinken is in this mindset. But if you're just listening to regular media coverage on this, it just seems like Putin's the super villain. He's just going into Ukraine because he has these imperial, dreams or anything like that. But you got to remember that this is just a way and to obtain another end. It's not of the strategy. It's not the actual end goal. the strategy. But I'd love to hear your thoughts on it.
Yeah, the media characterization, is quite interesting, and definitely plays into. You can probably flip on RT, and you would probably get clips of U.S. media, slandering Putin, and then you can twist that as an unfair narrative, like, oh, look how in Russia, like, oh, look how they're characterizing our president. I'm 100% agree in what you're saying. It actually kind of reminds me of that West Wing episode when President Bartlett's playing chess against everyone, and there's the
Sam Seaborn, Rob Lowe.
Yeah, exactly. And
He's playing chess against him.
There's a squabble going in
aircraft carriers in the Taiwan Strait.
Exactly. And
I know my West Wing.
You do know your West Wing. And so part of the move was, we're not actually, the end game wasn't actually to move in and confront, but Bartlett saying, oh, we're just sending our ships in that direction, and that's achieving another end, because that our intention isn't to intervene directly, our intention is to show that we are willing to, this is the posture we're going to take right now, and we know that we're going to, this will get us both to the table, kind of thing. And yeah, absolutely.
Just a quick note. I just realized that it wasn't actually that aircraft carriers. It was selling a certain type of new destroyer to Taiwan.
Yeah, that's what it was.
Yeah. And so he had sent the ships on his way, but called them back. But it was the act of sending the ships on its way to provoke the Chinese to come to the table.
Yeah, exactly. So does that mean Bartlett and Putin are kind of similar? No. So
I mean, when you're talking about foreign affairs, people can glean lessons from a lot of different places. I'm not saying Putin watches West Wing incessantly, but maybe the writers, there's definitely like an example of this in previous history, and the writers probably took it from there, and Putin probably has studied his history as well, I would imagine.
Absolutely. Or Aaron Sorkin is a secret clandestine advisor to Putin.
We got to watch out for that guy.
And so, yeah, I absolutely think that this move will bring people to the table. It's been very true that the line it's not East and West Germany anymore. We have a unified Germany. We have, people know their history. So it's very true. And I'm right there with you on it. And ideally, it'll come to the way we kind of think it'll shake out, where there'll be hopefully there'll be some nuclear anti-proliferation renegotiations and disarmament, as well as some sort of agreement that makes both parties happy, but Ukraine's still stuck in the middle. So I don't think that will change anytime soon.
I was looking over kind of different folks' opinions on what the U.S. reaction to it could be and their deterrent strategies. And there's not a lot of great options on the table for the U.S. right now, it seems like, because they've already tried moderate to heavier sanctions, economic sanctions on Russia during the Crimean crisis in 2014 and 2015. It seems like most folks believe that Putin's not deterred by those, and that they would have to be either very much harsher financial restrictions. We're talking about like closing off or blacklisting like Russian banks and such. And the counter argument to the financial sanctions was that China is Russia's biggest trading partner. And they would take this opportunity to kind of say, the US has way too much power over our financial security. especially with the dollar kind of being the coin of the realm right now. Let's figure out a way to kind of get around this for good. So I think we got to be careful there. The other deterrent factor you could do is obviously send lethal reinforcement, whether that be weapons, equipment, training, boots on the ground as sort of a tripwire that we talked about last week. But there's just not a lot of good options. But besides really negotiating, I think you gotta come to the table knowing exactly what you want to give up and don't want to give up in terms of as an alliance. And so I think we're going to kind of see some if we do get to a deal, we're going to see a long-term strategy for NATO start to form. What exactly do we want NATO to be? This is honestly a great opportunity for that. It's also kind of a challenge. All right, we're in the middle of a pandemic, and now we got to figure out exactly what we want to do with this massive alliance that is starting to cause a few headaches for certain countries, and certain countries are calling into question even its existence. Definitely still for NATO. Don't get me wrong on that. But people question its expansion. They question its open door policy. So I think that if the U.S. and Russia come to really the negotiating table and try to map this thing out, that you are going to see a longer term strategy start to unfold for NATO, just kind of out of necessity.
Yeah, I think that's spot on with NATO. From Putin's perspective, NATO's still somewhat of an adversary, it could be considered. And
100%, it's an adversary.
It seems it's easy to, like, from our vantage point, to dismiss it because we aren't over there. We don't know. We're just part of it, sort of, but still an ocean away. And so, I mean, I don't have a immediate hypothetical that I could think of that we would have to consider as a threat that would be on the same level as NATO. I mean,
I can only think back to like our history in like the late 1700s, early 1800s, when the U.S. as a young country was still surrounded by colonial powers. Right, you almost got this encirclement, and what do? We tried to expand and buy up land and push them out. We tried to make a deal with the British to help us put forward the Monroe Doctrine that kicked out any Western power that was trying to colonize over there. I mean, it's very much a real threat when you start to get surrounded. And Russia has 19 countries that have borders.
Yep.
It's tough.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I don't really have much more to add to that you didn't cover. I don't have any novel revelations. So I suppose we can move on to the next thing. I think my next couple are pretty, we could go on a long time about Israel, but we can kind of keep it short, especially with the next one. So Russia's central bank posed a blanket ban on cryptocurrencies. And so crypto's a quite popular thing over in Russia. So I think there's going to be a lot of if people in tracksuits are the ones that are using crypto, then we're gonna have a lot of sad Russian bros over there. So they're the first country that's closest to a Western country that's banned cryptos or private cryptos. And so is this something that could carry on into EU, America? It doesn't seem like it by any means, but the world seems to be turning it back on cryptocurrencies a little bit. And I personally think that's a good thing. But love to hear your take on it.
If it has utilization of people, folks will figure out a way around it in Western countries where they have to concern themselves with, or not just Western countries, but countries where they have to concern themselves with privacy rights. Russia does not have to really do that. Neither does China. And I think that they have the technology to crack down on it if they want to. I don't think that would be a much more difficult task, and it legally as well, in democracies and other countries where they have to concern themselves with privacy rights.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
that was kind of what I gleaned from it.
Yeah, I think from an environmental standpoint, I'm totally down with more places shutting down crypto, just from an energy utilization standpoint. From a philosophical standpoint, there's some merit. People who are in places with unstable currencies, of course, crypto's not exactly the most stable thing, but it is something that's traded in the rest of the world, whereas there's some countries where their currency is not, and is very weak and is very vulnerable. So if it's an option to easily and cheaply acquire a different currency, because it's not cheap to just get US dollars. It's not easy to just go and get whatever marks you want from anywhere else necessarily. So if you have a phone, which most people have in the world now, you can download an app and get yourself some crypto and hedge against your own currency's devaluation, which is certainly valuable in some contexts, but crypto is definitely overhyped in terms of how good it is for society. So
no one's going to ban it though based on environmental reasons. So,
well, that was one of the things that Russia cited is and it goes against part of their green agenda, among all the other
excuse
things.
me, no one with an actual like rule of law is with personal freedoms and property rights is going to ban it based on environmental reasons. So it might be regulated, but an outright ban, I don't see that happening.
Yeah, neither do I.
We don't do that for other environmental concerns.
That's extremely true. So sticking in the cyber realm, so half of global cyber defense investment over the past year was made by Israel specifically. And as a country that often uses offense defense, are they
like
setting
the
this?
Big 12 of the Middle East? I love it.
Are they setting the standard for cyber warfare frontier? And is that becoming the future or part of the future in terms of foreign conflict engagement?
Smart on their part.
Yeah.
I think Israel has really been a leader in, well, especially cybersecurity, and over the past couple of decades, the U.S., some of its best companies and just contributors to the cyber realm have come from Israel. I'm thinking of Palo Alto Network's CEO. It was also from, just as one example, came from Israel. And yeah, I mean, it allows you to punch above your weight, for sure. I'm not much of a cyber expert, but you can see the obvious advantages of having this as a different part of your arsenal when you're talking about options to deter others from harming your country. I mean, it's as simple as that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it'll be on a scale in terms of importance in conflicts and part of conflicts where some might employ it more, which Israel seems to be one of those, and some that will employ it less in terms of engagement, where in North Korea, they have cyber attacks as part of their arsenal, but it's not their main sense of deterrence, of course. And so because they can actually use their cyber attacks too, like on Sony, for instance. And so it'll be interesting how this all plays out. And so there's something interesting that's come out of that's dovetailed off of Israel's cybersecurity investment, and that is the private firms that are selling cybersecurity software and hardware and technique to other countries. And so is this kind of a private cyber arms race or cyber kerfuffle that's coming on? And should private cybersecurity firms be reined in a little bit? I think they should. There's reason for the global community to take on private cybersecurity firms, because that's something that could easily just go out of hand. But I have a feeling it'll be a reactionary measure eventually. It'll have to get pretty bad.
I just don't know enough about the ins and outs of like actually setting up a cybersecurity platform for somebody. Like, would it be like a regular, concrete weapon system, or anti-air system or something like that, where you can kind of see their blueprint and figure out how to attack it? I don't know.
I do have one more thing I want to say about Israel real quick, and then we can move on to your thing. So I definitely see what you're saying in terms of using cybersecurity as a counter military arms measure, but also there is the private and countries' respective domestic privacy concerns in terms of you bring on these cybersecurity firms, and you have this network of being able to have Big Brother in your country. So that's something that I have a feeling will need to get worse in order for people to pay more attention and move on. So
the classic conundrum: you can't fix it until it gets worse. But it's so true, especially for cybersecurity. So true.
Yeah. And so, I mean, in the US, it could be argued that we get the same issue, but derived from our own social media companies. And so, it had to get to this point before people started pushing back on it over the past year or so, which I'm totally fine with. And so James isn't on social media, so for the most part. So we need to inform him on this issue. No, he's very well informed then.
I'm not.
All right.
I just learned how to do Giphies this past year. It's great.
Oh, congratulations. Warms my heart. Get some high quality meme GIFs going. And all right, that's about all I have for Israel and my topics.
You still got to do your closing.
Ad.
Yeah, and ads. We're still sponsored by Hams, right?
We're still sponsored by Hams, everyone. And I haven't had a Hams in a while. I don't even know if I had one when I was home last. So we are sponsored by Hams.
We'll cut that part out. That's not what our sponsors like to hear.
We're deteriorating.
I've had a Hams every day this week, every hour this week.
We're at the point of recording where we're deteriorating. So we're sponsored by Hams. Both James and I have had a Hams every day since the day we were born. So I've been drinking more than you. And unless I die before you, then I will always drink more Hams than you, because that's right, we drink Hams every single day. It's just good for the liver. And so that's it. That's this week of Animal Punditry. It's created, edited, and everything by myself and dear friend James. Thank you for listening, and we look forward to giving you some takes next week.